healthy mind in a healthy body.
Welcome back, our viewers. We are here. Remember, the topic for today is cholera, and we have learned some of the things, including definition, including the causative agent of cholera, including the carriers of cholera. So, daktari, naomba tu tueleze dalili za ugonjwa huu wa kipindupindu ni gani?
Okay. Now, for signs and symptoms, before I maybe go to there are actually majorly 3 signs and symptoms of cholera. But before we understand these signs and symptoms, how they come about, especially for anybody who may have a medical background and who would want to know what's really happening, I'd want to explain that what happens is that when this bacteria is ingested or it gets into the stomach or into the intestine or the digestive system, what it causes, it has 2 subunits, subunit A and subunit B. Now, subunit B is responsible for the bacteria to mount itself onto the lining of the stomach or the intestines, okay? Subunit B. Subunit A remains outside. Now, what subunit A does, it prevents absorption of sodium and chloride. Okay? Subtype B, as it was embedded into the cells of the lining, it causes efflux or outward flow of sodium and chloride. Okay? And where there is sodium and there is chloride, there is water. Okay? So remember, water has been prevented from being absorbed. And we get a large amount of water of water for the cells in our body through injection and absorption. Okay? So now that sodium has been prevented from being absorbed, and therefore water will not also be absorbed. To make the matters worse, it is being effluxed, it is being drawn from the cells into the lining, into the lumen of the intestine, into the stomach lumen, okay? Now, as it comes from the cells, it comes alongside water, okay? And this water that is not being absorbed and this water that is being drawn from the cells is all being shedded, okay? Through diarrhea, okay? So what is happening is that the first sign is diarrhea. Okay? Diarrhea results. Secondly, dehydration occurs. Dehydration occurs. Now, the characteristic diarrhea of a patient suffering from cholera is that it is described as rice water. It's like you have dipped rice into water, and the color that you are finding, or the effluent is okay. The solution that you are making is like that one of water, of the rice having been dipped into water, or washed, rice being washed in water. What results is the characteristic cholera diarrhea that we see. So the rice water diarrhea is a description of a patient suffering from cholera. Okay? Dehydration, I said, is another issue that results. Cholera, unfortunately, does not affect the other systems apart from the digestive system, and therefore the issues to do with temperature are not mentioned. Okay? There's no rise in temperature or any effect on temperature, as many people who have infective diseases do portray high levels of temperature rise. Okay, so majorly it is dehydration, diarrhea. Now, The other signs and symptoms will result from the effects of dehydration, okay? The eyes that we are talking of as being sunken, the dry mucous membrane, the loss of skin turgor are all because of dehydration, okay? And now, because one is also losing potassium and calcium, again, they become weak, and nervous function or neurological functions may be impaired depending on the degree of loss of potassium and calcium. Okay? Yeah. So those are some of the signs and symptoms of a patient suffering from cholera. Wapenzi watazamaji, kipindupindu mtu akiwa ako nacho ama ako na ugonjwa wa kipindupindu hutokea na dalili ya kuendesha, ya kuhara. Okay? Mfululizo. Na nahara kila wakati, okay? Na pia vile vile kwa ajili ya kupoteza maji mengi mwilini, unapata kwamba mdomo wake utokea umekauka, macho yake yanatokea ni kama yamezama ndani. Kama ni mtoto utapata kwamba hapa kwenye utosi umeingia ndani, na ngozi yake ukiiguza imekauka, la tena ukiichuna kidogo hairegei kama vile ngozi ya mtu ule ambaye hajapoteza maji mwilini. Kwa hivyo dalili haswa ni hizo, kuhara sana mfululizo kila wakati, na pia dalili ambazo zinaambatana na kupoteza maji mwilini kama vile ukipima blood pressure. When the blood pressure is taken, of course it will be low, and also pulse will be high, and perhaps as we shall be talking about the stages, we can maybe explain how these things are coming about.
Okay. So mtazamaji, umesikia kutoka kwa daktari wetu hapa hizo dalili zote ambazo zinahusiana na ugonjwa wa kipindupindu ama cholera. Kwa hivyo daktari, ningependa utueleze kuna stages za huu ugonjwa wa kipindupindu tangu uingie na mpaka upone. Kuna stages ama vituo, na kama kweli uko na vituo, basi tunaomba uweze kutufafanulia hivyo vituo ni vingapi na ni gani na gani.
Okay. Now viewers, the stages of cholera are 3. In the first stage that occurs in the first 3 to 12 hours, the patient has profuse diarrhea, the rice water diarrhea that we talked about. Secondly, this patient has dehydration and the signs and symptoms that accompany dehydration, including the low blood pressure because of depletion of water volume. The blood pressure will be low. As a compensatory mechanism, the pulse will tend to be high. Okay? Now, so when you take the pulse, the pulse will be high, the blood pressure will be low. Again, during this first stage, and I say the first stage takes about occurs within the first 3 to 12 hours of infection. Again, the patient may begin to vomit, okay? And again, this vomitus also is rice water, okay? More or less like the diarrhea, okay? Because of the sodium and the chloride and the fecal material, again, ends, okay, comes to a point where now there's no more food that is shed as fecal material, and therefore we just have mucus and the shadings of the lining of the digestive system, and therefore it gives that characteristic of the rice water, vomitus and diarrhea or diarrheal stool. Okay, so together with that you find dehydration and the signs and symptoms of dehydration. So there is diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea, or the feeling to vomit. Yeah, and also dehydration. Vomiting, diarrhea, and dehydration. Those are the 3 things that occur during the first stage. In the second stage, now the signs and symptoms, the effects of the dehydration are what manifests during the second stage, okay? Where now the patient has lost enough or sufficient, reasonable amount of water and fluids and electrolytes, and therefore the result now is what we are saying: the low blood pressure. We have also the high pulse rate, and also any other signs and symptoms that accompany dehydration do manifest during the second stage. Now, the third stage is actually the stage of recovery. And during this stage, everything, almost everything, comes back to to normal. The patient recovers. The blood pressure builds up again. A pulse rate lowers down or normalizes, and also diarrhea subsides during this third stage, and also nausea and vomiting subsides. Oh yeah.
Okay.
So those are the three stages that affect a person with cholera. Yeah.
Now, still on those stages, in stage 1, you mentioned about something about the blood pressure lowers and the pulse rate goes up. I am asking it for the sake of maybe medical students who are at home. Is that what we call hypovolemic shock?
Yes. 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 It is. When now finally the patient goes into circulatory collapse, then we can talk of shock. Okay. But before maybe they get to this collapse, the eventual and end stage collapse, then they are just manifesting this low blood pressure and high pulse rate. But eventually, if rehydration is not done, circulatory collapse will result, and therefore hypovolemic shock will occur.
Wow.
Okay. That is now our worst stage. And as we said, cholera is a killer. Okay. It kills. If without proper intervention within a short period, we can lose our patient. And therefore, rehydration should be ensured before we get to the circulatory collapse and the hypovolemic shock, because the end result of this could be death. Yeah.
And then still on the stages, on stage 3, maybe for the sake of the viewers, so that they can be able to understand well, you have said that it is a stage where there is recovery. It is a recovery phase. So it is a must for rehydration to take place and medication for the patient to recover.
Exactly. For us to get to this stage 3, we must have intervened. We must have intervened. Otherwise, we may not get our patient spontaneously recovering without intervention. Okay?
Yeah.
Dehydration actually is the major cause, and therefore, without us intervening in the first 2 stages, we can't get to the third stage spontaneously or under natural circumstances. No, we are likely to lose the patient if we are not intervening.
If we are not intervening.
Yes.
Now, what are how can we diagnose cholera in the health facilities?
Okay. Now, diagnosis of cholera actually is through culture of the stool. That is the bottom line, culturing the stool. We take the stool sample, take it to a laboratory, and analyze what is causing this diarrhea. We shall be able to visualize the Vibrio cholera in the stool. Okay? However, before we get to that stage, we need to look at the clinical manifestation of the patient. Okay? When somebody is is vomiting, when one is diarrheaing, and we are seeing the characteristic diarrhea or vomiters, then we should be able to suspect that there is the person is suffering from cholera, especially if other members within the surrounding, within this person is living, have also been diagnosed with. We don't have to wait for laboratory analysis, or especially if another patient has already been diagnosed within that area, that the patient is exhibiting similar signs and symptoms. Yes.
Okay. So those are, this is how we diagnose
exactly.
cholera.
That we diagnose through analysis of the stool and isolation of this Vibrio cholerae in the stool.
Okay.
Yes.
And then do they take swabs maybe?
Yes, they can take an anal swab.
What about the vomiters?
And even the vomiters can also be analyzed for diagnosis.
For diagnosis.
Okay? So long as we get a sample from the digestive system, it could be this swab that we are talking about, an anal swab. It could be the stool itself. It could be the vomiters. Okay? So long as we get a sample from these 3 points, we can be able to analyze and isolate the bacteria. Yes. So
the viewers, you have heard for yourself, this is all about the diagnosis of cholera. We are going to take a short break, and we're coming back to see what are the measures taken in the management of cholera and the prevention and control measures and the medical management of cholera. So stay tuned, usibanduke hapo.
When the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh Lord, I want to be among the number, oh, when the saints go marching in.
Tangu mwishoni mwa mwaka jana, homa ya virusi vya corona yaani COVID-19 imeibuka kuwa tisho kubwa la kiafya. Maambukizi ya homa hii yameenea ulimwenguni kote, wala hakuna aliye salama. Serikali kupitia idara ya afya imeweka mikakati, miongoni mwao ikiwa uchunguzi wa homa ya corona miongoni mwa wasafiri katika mipaka yake yote kote nchini.
I'm very happy about the screenings that are going on in Tanzania and Kenya. I think it's very proactive that you're thinking about stopping it at the border so that it does not spread.
Inatisha kufikiri kukohoa tu kidogo kwa mazingira haya unaweza sababisha mlipuko wa homa hii usio na kifani. Ili kuzuia haya, serikali imeweka mikakati tosha kuhakikisha usalama wa Kenya wote.
The facility has all the equipments you need from handling a basic patient up to ICU setting.
Hata hivyo, wewe pia unalo jukumu katika kusaidia kuzuia kuenea kwa maambukizi.
Citizen responsibility is the key to the success of this initiative and these measures. Let's all do what we have to do individually. And this is how we are going to defeat this disease.
It's just our general hygiene, okay? And that now means at workplaces, we should ensure that our work surfaces are clean.
Always ensure that nimefanya proper sanitation ya mikono. Every time na board matatu, lazima ni sanitize mikono.
Sisi kama taifa tumepata kukumbana na changamoto nyingi na kali maishani, na kila wakati tumeibuka washindi. Hii homa ya COVID-19 hata kama inatisha, si tofauti nazo. Komesha corona, zingatia maagizo kutoka Wizara ya Afya, nawa mikono jinsi inavyostahili.
God's favor is unmerited. We will be telling you stories about women of favor or daughters of favor who through their stories have touched many lives. I'll be your host, Rebecca Wangoi, and this is Daughters of Favor. You are highly favored.
And we live in a world that is against God, against the Lord Jesus Christ, and opposed to so many things that you and I believe. So we have to decide, am I going to live by my emotions? Am I going to live by what other people are doing? Or am I going to live by the one thing that I know will absolutely give me clear, true guidance every single day of my life?
4 decades ago, we started In Touch Ministries to lead people worldwide into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Throughout the years, we've seen God's greatness, His love and His blessings in such awesome ways that we just want everyone to know Him.
When the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh Lord, I want to be among the number, oh, when the saints go
Karibuni tena watazamaji. Tumeongelea mengi kuhusu ugonjwa wa kipindupindu na tumeona vile ugonjwa huu uko na hatari sana kwa sababu unaambukizwa kutoka kwa mtu mmoja hadi mwingine kupitia kwa kinyesi ama maji machafu ambayo yako contaminated na feces ama chakula ambacho pia kimekuwa contaminated. Kwa hivyo wakati kumekuwa na huo ugonjwa lazima kuwe na hatua mwafaka ambazo zimewekwa kwa sababu without those measures kutakuwa na outbreak na community, watu wengi watakuwa affected na huo ugonjwa. Kwa hivyo daktari, nataka utuelezee kidogo ni mikakati gani huwa inawekwa kukabiliana na huo ugonjwa wa kipindupindu.
Viewers, for us to, once a case has been reported and it has been confirmed to be a cholera case, what needs to be done is actually to contain the spread of this cholera. Because as I said, it can occur as an epidemic, a pandemic, or an endemic disease. So if one case has been reported, we need to put measures into place such that it does not spread. And the risk of spread is majorly from those that are healthy carriers because they'll be moving from one region to another, yet they are carrying the bacteria with them. So what is normally done is once the case has been reported, the area should be put under surveillance, continuously observed, okay? The cases are normally managed locally within the area that they are diagnosed or within the area where they live. Anything can be made into a hospital. It could be a church, it could be a school, it could be a hospital itself, or any field that where tents can be erected and the patients can be managed there. And therefore, once a case has been reported, and by the way, we need to remember that cholera is a notifiable disease. Notifiable means that the administration need to be notified or informed that we have a case of cholera within a particular area, okay? Such that measures can be put in place that the area is sort of cordoned or put under observation, under health strict measures that the disease is contained within a particular area so that it does not spread outwards. Okay, so once the surveillance team has been put into place and the area has been put into under surveillance, then as I said, a hospital can be put up. The cases can be sent to the nearest facility within that area, and then management begins. Together with this management, we have to put also actually. We are not talking about medical management. We are talking about other measures that are put into place. Okay, so other measures include barrier nursing. Barrier nursing means that if a patient is diagnosed to be having cholera, they are nursed separately from the other patients. They are isolated. They are put separate from the other patients, so that they cannot infect the other patients. Another thing that needs to be put in place is we look at the water supply within that area. Is the water supply the one that is the source for the infection? So the water needs to be analyzed, for example, and we find that if it is because of contamination, sewages do pass at some places, and they contaminate the drinking water that we use. These are the things that commonly occur even in this Nairobi of ours. And therefore, when such happens, we need to disinfect this water. We need to put water under treatment and so therefore ensure that whatever water that is being consumed is clean water and safe water. Another thing that can be put into place is proper refuse disposal. Okay, so such that the diarrhea or the vomiters from the patients that have been diagnosed with cholera does not again get disposed of anyhow. Okay, it is safely disposed of. So that it does not again get to infect other people. So those are some of the measures that can be put into place once a case has been identified.
Identified.
Majorly is notifying, notifying the authorities, notifying the administrative units within the area that we have a case that is suspected of cholera or confirmed of cholera, and therefore the surveillance team is put into place and sent into that place so that it can institute other measures, including establishing the hospital and also taking care of the water. And if it is food, again, they look at whatever source of the food so that other people do not get access to the same food and get infected. Yes. So those are the measures.
Those are the measures.
Yes.
So in containing the disease, it means that when the first case has been discovered here, there is no movement. Ati achukuliwa hapa pelekwe Kiambu Hospital.
No. It is done where it has been reported. Yes. Such that by us transporting this patient to Kiambu, we are introducing Kiambu to cholera.
To cholera
okay?
again. Yeah.
So if it is in Githurai, we'd rather manage the case within Githurai. And the close contacts of that patient and also the area within which the patient is living should be put under surveillance, monitoring, continuous monitoring. Okay? So that if should any other person report the same symptoms, they are treated as cholera cases, and therefore we minimize their movement out of that area so that we contain the disease within that area and minimize spread. Yes. Because again, you remember I said that it could occur as a pandemic, and in the late 1890s, in the late 19th century, the pandemic spread over 5 continents, you see, because maybe they were not contained within the continent or even the country or even the area within which it started, you see. So affecting 5 continents, it means there was a lot of movement that was not controlled. Okay? So this movement is what we want to ensure so that the disease does not spread.
Okay.
Yes.
So you would basically restrict the movement of
exactly,
people.
we restrict the movement.
Okay.
Yes.
So what are the medical management of cholera? Inatibiwa aje? Yeah.
Once one has been diagnosed with cholera and you have confirmed that it is cholera, what kills the patient is actually dehydration. So we want to correct dehydration. This dehydration can be ensured through 2 ways, either by the patient taking orally or through infusing the patient with fluids. Okay? The oral route is the most appropriate, is what is recommended. And you can imagine that WHO recommends the use of ORS. This is the common salts that we find in the chemists and the hospitals. They are given to any child who's having diarrhea or any adult who's having diarrhea. And therefore, ORS, oral rehydration salts, that is what can be used. Imagine with the simple use of ORS, the patient can recover. Okay? So ORS is recommended, the dilution is done, the patient is to take orally. However, we have these patients who are vomiting, and therefore they can't retain whatever is being taken in orally. So these are the patients that require now infusion or infusion by fluids. Okay? So these ones, they have to be, the fluid replacement has to be done and done well and done profusely, such that we replace the fluid that is lost through diarrhea and vomiting. So rehydration is key. Rehydration is key. Rehydration either orally or by infusion. Another thing is now the use of drugs. Use of drugs now, there are 2 drugs that have been found to be effective against the Vibrio cholerae, and this is tetracycline. Tetracycline, the common capsule that we have used, and it has been there since time immemorial. Tetracycline, and any other things that drugs that are related, such as doxycycline, can be used for management of cholera. Yes, and the dosage, of course, is 500 milligrams 4 times a day. Again. But if it is doxycycline, it is 2 times a day, 500 milligrams 2 times a day. But if it is tetracycline, then it is 4 times a day, or every 6 hours. They are given 500 milligrams for 5 days. For 5 days. However, if it is besides that, one can also use, because some patients are sensitive to these tetracyclines, and therefore they can be given septrin or cotrimoxazole, which is given again twice in a day. So we either use
60 milligrams
960 milligrams. 960 milligrams. 480, 960, depending on the age of the patient. Okay, so it is given now twice in a day, and it can take up to 3 days. We expect the patient to recover. The acute moment we said is this during the first stage. During this first stage, if we do vigorous intervention, then we are able to save a large number of the victims of cholera. Okay, so medical management involves rehydration and administration of antibiotics. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, for example, there is an outbreak in a community whereby we have maybe 5 people who have been tested and have been found to have cholera. So is there any medication you can give to the other people who have not yet been, so that they can prevent?
Yes and no. Yes, because prophylaxis by the administration of doxycycline, for example, to the members within that community could help prevent the spread of cholera. However, having exposed so much people onto doxycycline, should the outbreak be so severe, okay, when a patient has already had a dose, a small dosage of doxycycline, and now you want to use the same doxycycline for management of cholera, then we are risking resistance to doxycycline. Therefore, it may not be so wise to give prophylaxis to the general population, as opposed to being so keen on identifying those cases that are infected and treating them. Okay, because if we use doxycycline for prevention, it will be hard for us to use it for treatment.
For treatment,
yes,
it becomes resistant.
It becomes resistant, or we build some resistance because we have given a small dose for prophylaxis, and now the case has been confirmed. Then we cannot use doxycycline because resistance may have developed. Yes. Okay. So it is yes and no, depending on the assessment of the team that is on the ground. Yes.
Okay. And still on management of cholera, we have talked we have said one of the way of managing is by replacing the lost fluids by rehydrating. So you have talked about ORS. It is oral. I just wanted the viewers to understand.
Mtazamaji, tukisema ORS ni ile chumvi ambayo iko kwa kakaratasi sachet, ambayo huwa tunaambiwa enda uweke kwa lita moja ama nusu lita ya maji, kutegemea na kiwango cha chumvi ambayo iko kwa hiyo sachet, uweke kwa nusu lita, alafu mwenye kukua na shida ya kuhara atumie. ORS is commonly available, inapatikana kwa urahisi sana, na ni muhimu. Kama huyu mtu hatapiki, anaweza kukunywa na asitapike, basi itamsaidia kurudisha yale madini na maji ambayo amepoteza kupitia kwa kuhara. Na kama itakuwa imeshindikana kwamba hawezi kukunywa kwa mdomo, basi itabidi awekewe maji kupitia kwa mishipa, na hivyo atahitaji huduma za kihospitali.
Kwa hivyo ndio infusion unasema.
Infusion ni
kuwekewa maji kwa mishipa. Watu wanasemanga line.
Wanawekewa
amewekewa line. Asante sana. Okay. Naomba tu muda wetu naona unayoyoma, tuongee kuhusu prevention and control. Tunawezaje epukana na ugonjwa wa cholera?
Yes, and that is what we are majorly, that is why we are discussing this topic actually. We want to prevent cholera. Cholera is easily preventable. Preventable because we said it is a fecal-oral root-transmitted disease. And therefore, to prevent cholera, we simply need to do food hygiene, water hygiene, and proper refuse disposal or excreta disposal. Okay? Kwa hivyo, tukiweza kupata maji ambayo ni masafi kuyakunywa, tukiweza kupata kwamba chakula ambacho tunakitumia kimepikwa vyema na hakina uchafuzi kupitia kwa wakati kinaandaliwa. So that if we are preparing our food properly cooking it, and we are drinking safe water, and we are ensuring that our hands are clean. Our hands are clean. Fecal oral means that you used at one time your hand placed a contaminated substance, either water or food, into your mouth. Okay? So if your hands are clean and you are consuming clean water and you are eating clean food, then we are able to prevent occurrence of cholera. Despite us being in an environment where there are reported cases, if the other members of the same community do not use the same contaminated water, do not consume the same contaminated food, and they are doing proper hand hygiene, then we are able to prevent cholera. There's also the vaccine for cholera. And this vaccine for cholera, usually it is insisted upon, especially when people are traveling, and they are given this vaccine just before they travel. There are different makes for the vaccine, depending on the manufacturers. Okay, there are those that are given 3 weeks apart. There are those that are given 4 weeks apart. There are those that are given at 6 weeks apart. There are those that can be given 10 days apart. But what we need to remember is that one needs at least 2 doses for them to be well protected against cholera. So vaccination is another option. And those people who are food handlers, especially maybe in hospitals, maybe they are the cooks in the schools, maybe they are people who prepare food in hotels, they need to occasionally be vaccinated with this vaccine for cholera. Okay, but it is not on the government schedule for periodic or continuous administration, and therefore, depending on one's working environment or intention to travel, they may require to take this vaccine. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So those are the preventive measures
for cholera.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm very glad to have you in our studio today. Thank you for taking your time. I think our time is up. Na kwa watazamaji, tunashukuru sana kwa kuchukua muda wenu kutusikiza sisi. Hakika tumeweza kufaidika leo kwa haya mambo kadha wa kadha ambayo tumeweza kuyaongea. Na ikiwa kama uko na maoni ama uko na maswali ama uko na mapendekezo, unaweza kututumia ujumbe mfupi kupitia kwa hii namba ambayo iko hapo chini kwa screen ya television, na basi tutaweza kufikia kwa haraka iwezekanavyo. I have been your host David Ngure. Tukutane tena wiki ijayo siku kama hii na wakati kama huu. Asanteni sana.